All right, so we're going to get started for today. Hope everybody had a good break. So we're going to do a couple of things today. The first thing, as requested, is we're going to do a little GitHub walkthrough. I showed you how to use GitHub through Visual Studio, but I'm going to show you how we can use GitHub on its own, because it's not really a Visual Studio thing. It's its own independent application. So you can and should be using GitHub basically as a code repository for all of your applications. So that way they're backed up online, they're archived, and also you can collaborate with other people. So there is a tutorial right on Git. So we'll basically do a quick walkthrough. So if you want to log into Blackboard and go into the Lesson 8 folder, and you can open up a tab to this link, the help.github.com. Now there is a separate tutorial here as well from Code School. You can try this one on your own. This is also free. But we're going to have a look at this one, and we'll go through it. You should all have GitHub accounts. I think I asked you to create them. If you haven't created one yet, you can go ahead and create one right now. It's free. And I think you have an option to say you are a student. If you have that option, you should say that you are created as a student account, because that also gives you some private, I think 5 private repositories, which regular GitHub users don't get. So I'll just go to my GitHub page. So we'll go to github.com and log in. Create your account. If you don't have one, it just takes a second. The other thing that you should be doing on your own machine is you should install the GitHub client. Now you don't necessarily have to use the client application. We're going to play around with the command line today, but having the application installed will enable a bunch of the GitHub functionality for you. So, well, everybody should have a version of Windows, so you can get the client. It's not a big download and it's free. So you can just go to windows.github.com and install this on Windows. As I said, it's not a big download. It won't take long to install. If you want to install it on a Mac OS, although in this class obviously we're going to be working in Windows, you just go to mac.github.com and you can install it that way. So this client looks something like this once you install it. It's really not very good, this interface. I don't like it very much. We're not going to use it. But at least it sets GitHub up on your machine. So what we're going to do basically is log into our GitHub account through the command prompt. And then we'll go through the process of creating a repository, making some changes, and doing all this through the command prompt rather than through Visual Studio. When you're working in Visual Studio, it's pretty easy, because you can just say, add this to source control, add your Git credentials, and sync it to Git directly through Visual Studio. But we'll look at doing the original way through the command prompt, just so you know what that looks like.
Are we, like I signed up, are we supposed to download just the first computer, or just work on the site?
Download this tool at windows.github.com. Right in the middle, there's a big download link. The address is windows.github.com. It's a small download. It's maybe a megabyte or 2, I think, this file. It's not very large.
Windows.
So when you're prompted, you can just click run to run that install. So we will use the command line for this. You guys really haven't done, I don't think, any command line programming at all since you've been here. It's probably a good interface to get used to because we're going to be using it quite a bit next term when we use the mean stack and Node.js. Basically, we'll be using the command line for running most of our launching and configuring our Node application. So it's good that we get a little bit familiar with it. Is this still installing, or is it done already for people who've had to download it?
Still installing.
Still installing?
We need to download it on the lab computer.
I believe it's on the lab computers already. So no, if you're working on a lab machine, I don't think you need to install it.
Is there a way I can just quickly check for it?
Just see if it's in the computer studies menu. It should be on there.
It seems like it'll may take like 5 minutes with it.
That's okay. There's something we can do in the meantime.
All right.
So in your browser tab, when you're logged into GitHub, so how do we create a new repository? So basically, here's my account. I've got all of these repositories. So each repository, each application is considered a code repository. So to create a new one, you can create an unlimited number of repositories. Up at the top right, if you just click on this plus sign, it says create new. If you click on repository, and we'll give it a name, I'll just call it Git demo. We can all have the same name because the repository names are prefixed with our username. So even if I have ifotn/git demo, you can all have one with the same name. Really doesn't matter what you call the repository. There's also this option, so I'll say, put in just a description. And there's a check mark here. When we're going to use Visual Studio, we leave this unchecked. But if we check this, it says this will let us immediately clone or copy the repository to our computer. We don't need to do this if we're importing an existing code library. So if we're going to start out with a blank one and we're not going to use Visual Studio for managing it, we'll probably want to create this README file. And just click Create. We can create this as a public repository, that's fine. So all we have in here is just this empty text file. Now, we can actually make changes right here on GitHub. For most of what this little demo will use the command line, but we can actually edit our repository right on GitHub. So if I click on the README file, it just has the title and my description. There's an edit link right here, over on the right. If I click edit, we can add some when I scroll up. So here's the contents of that file. I'll just add some text, adding some comments to the README file. You can just put anything in here, doesn't matter. And there's a preview button to see the changes. So if I click preview, it marks in green any code that was changed, any lines, gets this little green line here to the left. Now to save my changes, anytime we make changes and we want to put those changes onto GitHub, we have to commit them. So I'll just call this first commit, added with a description, added text to README file. So a commit is like a publish. So we're publishing a new version to GitHub. And I'll click the commit changes button. We have to put in a description. We have to put in some kind of comment in order to publish every time. GitHub requires that. So every time we upload a new batch of changes. So our commit was done. And now if we go back, it says that we actually have two commits. So there was the original one when we created the repository, and now there was a second commit. If I click on the commit so we can see, so 3 minutes ago we created this version of the code, and then I republished a new version with those changes. So I can see what was changed. It tells me the README file was changed, and this is what got added. Now, normally we're not going to be making changes to our repositories directly through GitHub. We're going to be changing them on our development machine and then making a new commit when we want to upload that batch of changes to GitHub. Either because we're done work for the day, so we want to back up our code to GitHub, or because we're working with somebody else and we want to put our changes, push our changes to GitHub so we can maybe merge them with somebody else. So that's one thing we can do. Another thing we can do is get a copy of somebody else's code. Okay? So you're brought onto a project, they have an existing code library that's on GitHub. How do you get a copy of it so that you can work with it and do whatever, make whatever changes or additions you have to do in an existing code base? So Git has a method that they call forking. Forking is basically taking a copy of an existing. So if we go here in your browser, if you go to github.com, here's a sample. If you go to github.com/octocat/spoon-knife. This is a sample GitHub repository. So it's for demonstration purposes only. And in effect, we can make a copy of this that will copy this little application. It has an HTML file. Basically, it's got a README file, an index file, and CSS. So here's what it looks like if I click on the index page. There's the HTML. And there's a simple style sheet. So once we're logged in, we can see how many people have copied it and what it tells us. Fork your own copy to your account. So if we click fork, this will make a new repository in our own GitHub account, and it'll copy this index page and CSS file. So we'll basically take our own version. So I'll click on fork. And then I'll click on my account. Oh, actually, I'm going to delete. Oops, sorry. I already have this one. I'm going to delete it, and then I'll redo it. I'll redo that. So I'm going to click on fork. fork it to my account, and now I have my own. Should just take a few seconds. So now I have my own copy. So I grabbed it from the Octocat user, from their spoon knife repository. Now I have my own spoon knife repository. And when I go in here, it's got the index file, HTML, CSS. So I've basically taken a copy.
Oh, I have had you 2 questions. If you were to do something like that, does it give like you're not stealing it? Like it says that person made it, correct?
It does. It said, yeah. So it says that it was authored by this person.
Oh, okay. So we can't like cut and paste, and then some asshole goes to cut and paste and says it's theirs.
Well, I mean, this is largely an open source repository. So something like this is why I suggested when you create your account, you should say you're a student so that you get some private repositories. If you, as a student, you get 5 private repositories, which means you can use GitHub, but other people won't be able to see those repositories unless you share them.
And the other question is, I just got downloaded in that, and it's asking me to find local repositories, and it keeps on saying like desktop, and it goes for like this, pick some random file. Should I just skip that, or?
Just pick a directory on your computer, any folder, just maybe inside of documents, where you'll store your code.
It chose that for me, sort of thing.
That's fine. You can just accept that as the default. So now we have a copy on GitHub, but what we want to do is we want to open this file on our local machine so we could make changes to it. So we won't change the original version that is on this account, but we have our own local copy that we can play with now. So we'll need to open up the command prompt. So the easy way to do this is click on the start button and type CMD.
Always at the top.
And you'll get to this command prompt. If you're on a lab machine, it'll say C users, I think GC student, which is fine. So the first thing we have to do is log into Git. So we'll type the command git config, short for configure. And I'll use the descriptor global, so this way we don't have to keep logging in. We're basically going to log in. So we'll set the user.name and then just put in your GitHub user account name.
How would you get? I just
Click the start button and type CMD. And hit enter. So we're basically logging into Git through the command prompt. And don't use my username here. You need to use your GitHub username. Then we need to put in our email address. So similar command, except instead of user.name, you use the email address that you've used for your GitHub account. And hit enter. It says Git's not recognized.
Yeah.
Is the Git client installed?
It was not installed before, and I installed it, but
I installed it, and it's.
Git is not recognized.
No, yeah.
Well, my suggestion would be moving forward on Fridays that you bring your own machines.
Yeah, but my own machine, it doesn't seem to recognize me either. Like, it's asking me to use my username, so I take down. are you on? Oh. How are you linked up to my stuff? Like, is it just automatically recognized you? Because I just turned on GitHub.
I'm not linked to you at all.
It's showing what you had, like add CSS and that. I haven't looked at your site yet. It has your notes on it. You just popped up.
That's because you forked, those aren't my notes.
I mean,
You
yeah,
forked this account.
I just don't know how I did that. Like, I haven't even been to your account. I don't know.
When you clicked fork, did you go here and click fork? Did you go to the URL I showed you and clicked fork?
No. I was trying to set I was just following around with View, but I was trying to set my my GitHub up on my computer.
It should be able to. So you've installed GitHub. Okay, try this. Try opening the Git shell application instead of the regular command prompt.
I just went up onto the actual git-scm.com and installed it from there, and it now works.
Through Git SCM. Okay.
Yeah, it's like I didn't download the GUI when I downloaded like just Git itself.
Okay. So if you go to git-scm.com, and downloads, there's another free download. So if you click on Windows, there's a 17 megabyte file. You can save and run. Thanks, Brandon.
So, Git. What are we downloading now, exactly?
That is the actual Git itself. It's not the GUI application. It's the full backend Git client. Where are we typing into command prompt again?
Sorry, so I've just updated this link on Blackboard. So here are the two downloads. You download Git and the GitHub client from here, and then here are the tutorial links. Okay. So those would be the commands to log in. And then for your password, you use this command, git config credential helper wincred.
Should we wait for the Git to download first?
Yes. Oops.
For the SCM, but if we don't
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
I already have it downloaded and just trying to run through all this stuff. Like, just in the past.
You can accept the defaults. You don't have to change anything.
It's just a release. Yeah, anytime you make a change.
So these commands will log us in, and what we want to do is download a local copy of that spoon knife application. We'll want to make some local changes and then push those changes back to GitHub.
Go once.
So once the Git client has been installed, you should be able to log in. So we have this copy of this little spoon knife application, but that copy lives on, we have it in our GitHub account. Here we have a local copy. Sorry, we have an online copy, but we don't have that code locally yet. So if we want to take a copy of a GitHub repository and get it copied to our local machine, this is what's known as cloning. So we have a few options. I mean, we can click on clone in the desktop. That will open it in this clunky client. We're going to do it right through the command prompt. So if I type git clone and put in the full URL, actually I can get the URL right here. There's a little box that says HTTPS clone URL. This is a copy button. If I just click copy here, and in my command prompt, if I type git clone and right click and paste, this will grab the entire URL of my online version. I already have that file, I better delete it. So I'm just putting it right in my user folder. But I could change the path and put this copy of my code anywhere.
Okay, it's like I'm trying.